Tonight, breaking news. The urgent message from the White House on Ukraine, warning the threat of a Russian invasion is, quote, immediate. The State Department urging Americans to evacuate Ukraine in the next 2 days as Vladimir Putin moves more troops towards the border, potentially barreling towards war. Top U.S. officials say an offensive could begin at any moment, even before the end of the Beijing Olympics. An attack would likely come first from the air, followed by a ground assault. So why are some Ukrainians still insisting war will not happen? Richard Engel joins Top Story. Our conversation coming up in moments. And the other major headline, Super Bowl 56, kicking off in just 48 hours from right here in Englewood, California. The LA Rams gearing up to do their city proud. Superstar quarterback Joe Burrow telling me how he's approaching the biggest game of his career. The Cincinnati Bengals looking for a Hollywood ending of their own. Police ambushed, 9 officers injured in a dramatic shootout. A man barricading himself inside a Phoenix home for hours. At one point, dropping a baby on the front porch. One woman shot inside. We have news of her condition tonight. FedEx shooting outrage growing after a black delivery driver was allegedly targeted by a white father and son. The pair accused of chasing the man in a pickup truck, firing bullets at his van. The driver tonight demanding justice for a crime he believes was racially motivated. Also breaking tonight, the child vaccine delay. Pfizer postponing its request for the FDA to authorize its vaccine for kids under 5, saying more data is needed to determine how many doses kids need. This as protests over COVID lockdowns escalate at the northern border. Ontario now declaring a state of emergency. Good evening. Top Story coming to you live tonight from outside of SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, California. The Super Bowl just 48 hours away. Much more on that in a moment. But tonight, we need to begin with that breaking news on Ukraine. The White House warning of an immediate threat of a Russian invasion. More than 130,000 Russian troops now surrounding Ukraine, many of them in Belarus, conducting massive-scale military exercises. New U.S. intelligence revealing Russia now has 80% of the troops it would need in place to launch a full-scale invasion. Satellite images showing a buildup of Russian military equipment and tents. You see it right here, just 70 miles from the Ukrainian border. The U.S. deploying an additional 3,000 troops to the region, urging all civilians still in Ukraine to evacuate immediately. Experts had predicted an invasion was most likely to happen after the Beijing Games, with Russian President Vladimir Putin weary of upstaging his Chinese counterpart, Xi Jinping, one of his last remaining allies. But this new intelligence suggesting a troubling escalation. And there is late word tonight. President Biden will speak to Putin tomorrow. The stakes of that meeting could not be higher. So let's get right to Richard Engel, who is on the ground for us tonight in Ukraine.
As Russian troops encircle Ukraine, conducting military drills along the border, U.S. officials gave their most urgent warning yet that Russia could invade Ukraine before the Olympics closing ceremony on February 20th.
The Russians are in a position to be able to mount a major military action in Ukraine any day now.
The Pentagon now sending an additional 3,000 U.S. troops to Poland, with the White House warning Americans to leave Ukraine within 48 hours.
Any American in Ukraine should leave as soon as possible.
But tonight, American Dave Agan in Kiev says he's not going anywhere.
I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm not running. I have too many friends here. This is my home, and I like it here.
President Biden stressed to Lester that help is not coming for Americans who stay, but that President Putin knows not to target Americans.
You've told him Americans will be a line that they can't cross?
I didn't have to tell him that. I've spoken about that. He knows that. Look, what I've asked is American citizens should leave now.
But here in eastern Ukraine, many Ukrainians are not bracing for an attack. Lyubov showed us the basement under her apartment building. The tenants hold parties in it now.
So what do you think? Are you going to use this as a bomb shelter? Are you going to have to come down here for real?
This will not happen. Nothing will be bombed here, she says.
Richard Engel joins us now from Ukraine. Richard, when you watch that story, I think the only question you have is why, if the world thinks Russia's going to invade Ukraine, do the Ukrainians you're speaking to think it's not going to happen?
Well, the government is telling them that, the president, I should say specifically, because there are some divisions in the government, President Zelensky specifically has been saying repeatedly that this is nothing new, that people shouldn't get panicked, that it is the West, specifically the United States and the President Biden, that is exaggerating the threat, and that people should just go about their business and not take things too seriously. I understand from one point of view that he doesn't want panic, and part of the Russian campaign, part of Putin's objective, is to create panic, is to create unrest, specifically so that they can overthrow Zelensky's government. So he doesn't want to show any kind of weakness which could undermine his position and let Vladimir Putin achieve his goal. But at the same time, he doesn't want to seem totally out of touch with reality. And his critics are saying that increasingly, when it's so obvious with this massive troop buildup, that he keeps telling his people that there's nothing new, that while he's trying to stay strong, that he could end up looking a little bit that he's not seeing the reality of the situation around him.
Richard, you spent a lot of time with the Ukrainian military. Are they ready? And I know that's kind of a hard question to ask, because when you're facing a superpower, I don't know if you're a much smaller military, if you can ever be ready. But is their mindset right?
The mindset is right, and many Ukrainian soldiers say that they will fight, they want to fight, they want to fight, but they are ready to fight if necessary. But it is a fight that they probably cannot win in a straight-up battle. And many Ukrainian military officers, although they won't say it necessarily on camera, they are aware of that discrepancy in force. And NATO officials that I've been speaking to and Western intelligence officials think that it would just be a matter of days before the Russians were able to overwhelm the Ukrainian military, and that the Ukrainian military, knowing that it was going to be overwhelmed, would probably pull back from a fight, keep some of its troops in reserve, and go into a resistance movement. That it wouldn't make sense to throw everything you've got, all your equipment, all your best fighters, against a superior army or a militarily dominant army, lose everybody, and then not have anything left in reserve to carry out a long-term fight. That is, if assuming that this goes into that sort of the maximalist option, where there are troops pouring into Ukraine from every possible entry route, and the Ukrainian army is in a battle of survival. There are other possibilities where Putin just tries to take little pockets of this country and tries to send a message, destabilize Zelensky, without having to incur a full invasion.
Richard Engel for us tonight. Richard, you and your team, please stay safe out there. With U.S. officials warning that a Russian invasion of Ukraine could come any day now, I want to bring in former ambassador to Ukraine, William Taylor. He served under President George W. Bush and again under President Trump, and he's now the vice president for Russia and Europe at the U.S. Institute for Peace. So, Ambassador Taylor, first off, thank you again for joining Top Story. President Biden has a call with Putin tomorrow morning. What do you think the purpose of that call is?
Tom, I think the purpose of that call is to tell him again, reinforce again, what a bad mistake it would be for President Putin to pull the trigger. The cost to President Putin of pulling that trigger would be dramatic and devastating, not just to him, but also to Russia. Richard has already indicated that this will be a bloody fight. It's not a fair fight, but it will be a very bloody fight on both sides. There will be many Russian families who will be burying soldiers, and in Russian towns across the country. This will not be a popular fight. This will not be a popular decision to go into and invade Ukraine. Most Russians have a very positive attitude towards Ukraine, and indeed, President Putin has told them recently that we're all one nation, that the Ukrainians are our brothers, and for him now to invade them, for him now to crush them, and for him now to kill many Ukrainians, this will not go over well in Russia. The economic costs will be heavy. The sanctions on all Russians and on President Putin will be dramatic. He will feel it. His people around him will feel it. So President Biden tomorrow will emphasize that there is another way. There is another way. President Putin can sit down and talk about his concerns. We're ready to listen, and we're ready to negotiate.
Ambassador, you know, in these final weeks, there's been a lot of shuttle diplomacy by European leaders that have not involved the United States in person, at the table, right there, face to face. Do you think the Biden administration at some point sort of walked away from this problem, or do you think at some point they made the calculation that there's nothing left to do?
Neither, Tom, neither. They've not walked away, and there's plenty to do. And the amount of consultation, the amount of conversation, discussions among Americans and all the Europeans, every politician who has been to Moscow and who's been to Kyiv, and they're very careful to do both, has been in close conversation with President Biden, with Secretary Blinken, with Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor. The level of coordination, cooperation, and solidarity, unity, is dramatic. And so when the Chancellor goes or when the President of France goes, they are going with a consolidated message. By and large, they've got different stories, different little angles, because they come from different countries. But nonetheless, they are focused on the same thing, to tell Mr. Putin, do not invade, the cost will be very high, and there's another way to go.
I asked that because Moscow at some point pointed out this week that Macron was making deals that he could not do without the U.S. at the table. Now, whether that was their spin on things to their citizens, they were putting that message out there. I do want to ask you, though, since you know Ukraine so well, how long do you think Ukraine can last if Russia does invade?
Ukraine will prevail, Tom, in the end. Ukraine will last a very long time because, as Richard pointed out, even if the Russians invade in force, and go all the way to, big cities, the Ukrainian people will fight alongside of their army. And indeed, the Ukrainian people will take up arms, and every Russian patrol, every Russian soldier will have to look over his shoulder because there will be Ukrainians shooting at him. In every town, in every village, on every back road, the Russians will lose more and more. And in the end, the Ukrainians will drive out the Russians like the Afghans did. The Russians have a bad experience with invading.
Ambassador, briefly, because we don't have a whole lot of time, I do want to ask you, if an invasion happens, what type of humanitarian crisis do you envision? There are a dozen, if not half a dozen, countries that surround Ukraine. What do you think is going to happen?
Clearly, there will be a lot of Ukrainians who will go west. And they have allies to the west, and I am very sure that they will get a sympathetic, humanitarian, warm welcome as they do. Those are all NATO allies. Those are all allies who are supporting Ukraine, not with troops on the ground, but with all kinds of support, both political, military, financial. These are friendly nations to their west, and so they will welcome these refugees.
Ambassador Taylor for us tonight. Ambassador, we always appreciate your time. Thank you. And we will continue to monitor the breaking news out of Ukraine throughout this broadcast. But now to the big showdown, the other big story happening in America right now. We are here at SoFi Stadium because it's the site of Super Bowl 56. Final preps are underway right behind me here. The Rams and the Bengals getting ready to square off in what's expected to be the most watched Super Bowl ever. Today, I got a chance to ask star quarterback Joe Burrow how he's getting ready for the game of his life.
With under 48 hours to go until Super Bowl 56, both teams are making their final preparations for the big game. The spotlight is on quarterback Joe Burrow, looking to win a Super Bowl just 2 years after a national championship.
Joe, you've had a lot of big games in your life and in your career. Never a game like this. Do you prepare any differently?
No, you can't. Otherwise, you won't be successful. You got to treat every game like it's the Super Bowl. That's why we're here, because we do that.
Veteran quarterback Matt Stafford is hoping his years of experience will lift the favored Rams to victory.
We've had a great week of preparation, and we're excited to get out there and play.
Also preparing for prime time, law enforcement personnel from more than 10 federal and 13 local agencies protecting the fans and athletes at SoFi Stadium for what is classified as a Tier 1 special event.
Everything from the massive Halo video board to the way the stadium was designed is state of the art. Fans who come here say there's not a bad seat in the house. And at the Super Bowl, all 70,000 of those seats are going to be filled.
Welcome to Super Bowl 2022!
For fans of both teams, the excitement is reaching a fever pitch.
It's been incredible. I mean, I just got here, but getting off and seeing Bengals in the front, didn't think we were going to be here.
it's a dream come true for me to have the Rams in the Super Bowl in LA.
Those lucky enough to have a ticket can expect a game that will turn up the heat, quite literally. The National Weather Service is now warning it could be the hottest Super Bowl ever, with temperatures up to 90 degrees. Super Bowl MVP and former Rams quarterback Kurt Warner knows what it feels like to prepare for the biggest game of the year.
What does it take to win a Super Bowl?
Man, it takes a whole team. I think sometimes we get lost in the shuffle of talking about superstar here, superstar there, quarterback here, quarterback there. You'll have some great performances, but it'll take all 53 guys showing up, playing their game, making plays when they get the opportunity for somebody to win a championship.
In the booth for NBC and calling his 11th Super Bowl,
who could have predicted this?
Al Michaels.
Joe Burrow, I think, has captivated the country. An 18-point comeback against Kansas City was crazy. And so far, we've seen fantastic playoff games. I just hope there's one more left with great drama.
Two teams with one last shot at being crowned the champion. Two coaches who are polar opposites. Sean McVay wears his emotions on his sleeve. Coach Taylor with a more subdued approach.
You and Sean are very young coaches, right? What will you tell fans out there about the way you and Sean coach? Is there anything similar about your guys' coaching style?
You just got to be true to yourself. I think he's a very dynamic personality, and that's true to him. I'm not a very dynamic personality. I try to be true to myself.
Coach Zach Taylor right there. Both those coaches will be on the field on Sunday, and coverage of the big game between the Rams and the Bengals starts at noon on Sunday. You can see it on NBC, and we'll have much more on Super Bowl 56 later in this show. All right, we want to turn now to COVID and another big headline, the breaking news tonight. Parents with children under 5 years old who want to get them vaccinated will have to wait a little bit longer. NBC News national correspondent Gabe Gutierrez has the latest.
Tonight, Pfizer is hitting the brakes, at least for now, on its COVID vaccine for the youngest age group, kids 6 months through 4 years old. The company says it's postponing its application for emergency use authorization and will wait for data on a 3-dose series of the vaccine because it believes 3 doses may provide a higher level of protection in this age group. The FDA says data came in rapidly during Omicron.
It makes sense for us to wait until we have the data from the evaluation of a 3rd dose before taking action.
An FDA advisory panel had been set to discuss the application next week, and the CDC had said if all went well, those youngest children could have started receiving the shots by President's Day.
Do you think Pfizer may have jumped the gun here?
I think Pfizer took a gamble and are now realizing that that gamble was probably not the right decision and are rethinking their strategy.
For adults, each Pfizer dose is 30 micrograms, but for the youngest children, each dose is just 3. Pfizer said in December that 2 doses for those kids did not generate a strong enough immune response in its trial. Yet just days ago, Pfizer's CEO seemed confident the FDA would sign off on 2 doses while awaiting more data for a 3rd.
I think that they will be pleased with the data and they will approve it.
But the wait now drags on for families like Aaron Parnas and his 3-year-old son, Bailey.
It's really kind of frustrating because we were looking forward to having him vaccinated as soon as we could.
Pfizer now says it expects data for that 3rd dose by early April, so it could be at least 2 months before the vaccine is authorized. Meanwhile, Moderna says it could have data for kids 2 to 5 years old by March.
All right, Gabe joins us now live from New York. Gabe, this news is no doubt going to confuse parents, but I also know you have some new reporting on booster shots as well.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. A new report from the CDC suggests there is a decline in effectiveness from the booster shot after 4 months. And while the booster does still protect against severe illness, this report adds to the question of whether a 4th shot will be necessary. Tom?
Yeah, a lot of mixed signals coming out tonight from officials. All right, Gabe, we appreciate that. And battles over pandemic restrictions raging across the globe. The ripple effect spread into the economy. A state of emergency declared in a Canadian province where trucker protests have stopped millions of dollars in trade. This as workers in the U.S. protest as thousands face termination over a vaccination mandate. Emily Aketa has more.
The showdown over pandemic restrictions seen around the world.
I call it a siege because that's what it is.
An entire Canadian province under a state of emergency. Late tonight, a judge ordering this trucker-led protest to clear out after the effort brought hundreds of millions of dollars of trade to a standstill.
If it wasn't for us, you wouldn't have anything you own.
Carmaker Ford warning of a potentially widespread impact on all automakers in the U.S. and Canada. General Motors chartering cargo planes in order to bypass the gridlock.
You now need to understand that you are breaking laws.
The so-called Freedom Convoy now beyond Canada's borders. In France, motorists standing in solidarity, where the president is calling for calm. And today, more unrest in the U.S. In New York, potentially thousands of employees could face termination tonight, according to the city, in what is believed to be one of the largest worker reductions because of a vaccine mandate.
I feel emotional when I think about my husband and I possibly losing our jobs simply for saying no thank you to a medical intervention.
Those on the chopping block make up less than 1% of the city's workforce.
It's not about termination, it's about vaccination.
This week, a growing list of states rolling back indoor mask mandates. But in an exclusive sit-down with Lester Holt, President Biden cautions against easing restrictions too quickly.
When I got in office, only 46% of the schools were open. Now 98% of them are open, and they're wearing masks.
Something these New York parents say no longer is necessary.
They've been vaccinated, the numbers are low, and it's time for the governor to step back.
A group of New York City employees hoped the Supreme Court would block a vaccine mandate for employees here, but today, Justice Sotomayor denied that request. Tom?
Emily Aketa for us tonight. Emily, thank you. We head to Arizona now, where 9 officers were ambushed and wounded while responding to a house call. They say a woman was shot inside a home, and when they arrived on the scene, a baby caught in the middle of the crossfire. NBC's Miguel Almaguer has the details and a warning. Some of this video is disturbing.
When the hail of gunfire came to an end, 9 Phoenix police officers were shot or wounded, the ambush unfolding before sunrise.
It just highlights the uncertainties and the dangers of this job.
The first officer arriving at this home responding to a 911 call. A woman shot inside, say police.
Get back!
That first officer shot multiple times. After backup arrives, a man emerges from the home with a baby, placing her on the ground before being taken into custody. As officers rescue the infant, another barrage of gunfire.
We have 3 more officers shot. We have the one and then we have 2 more. There are 3 more officers shot.
Police say all 9 officers and the baby somehow survived. The alleged gunman inside the home found dead. The woman who was initially shot lost her life. Already this year, 4 officers have been killed in the line of duty. 62 were killed by gunfire last year.
If I seem upset, I am. This is senseless. It doesn't need to happen, and it continues to happen over and over again.
Tonight, the call of duty and the dangers that come with it.
All right, Miguel joins us now from here in L.A. Miguel, any word on a possible motive yet?
Well, Tom, officials have not yet officially released a motive, but here's what we do know. The man and the woman who were inside were a former couple, and that baby who was rescued was actually their child. But police say, regardless of what the motive was here, this example highlights just how dangerous it is to put on a uniform every day. Tom?
That reminder is so clear. All right, Miguel, thank you for that. Coming up on Top Story right here in California, the raging wildfires threatening communities on the coast, families forced to evacuate, homes destroyed, record high temperatures fueling those flames, and the family calling for justice after a young black man allegedly was shot at while delivering FedEx packages, how the police are now responding. And the body cam video showing the middle school bus driver arrested, accused of driving drunk 4 times the legal limit with 40 kids on board. Top Story, just getting started on this Friday. Back now with the black FedEx driver who says he was nearly shot by 2 white men in Mississippi. The men allegedly chasing the driver in a pickup truck before shooting at his car. What that driver was asked when he called police and the new charges his attorneys are demanding for the suspects. Priscilla Thompson has more.
Tonight, a Mississippi family outraged, calling for tougher charges against 2 white men accused of chasing a black FedEx driver, one of them allegedly firing multiple rounds at his delivery van.
This man came within an inch of losing his life.
24-year-old DeMonterio Gibson and his attorney calling the incident racially motivated.
He was simply black while working. That is not a crime in Mississippi.
Gibson says in January he was driving a marked Hertz van with his FedEx uniform on when, after dropping off a package, a white pickup truck on the property began following him, then attempted to cut him off.
I swerved around him and I just started hitting the gas to try to get out of there.
But before getting far, Gibson says he saw something else.
There's another guy standing in the middle of the road with a gun pointed at my window.
When he refused to stop, the man began shooting, Gibson says.
All type of bullet holes in the back of the van.
When Gibson reported the incident to police, he claims he was asked,
"Were you at this address?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "We just received a call about a suspicious person from this address." I informed him that I wasn't a suspicious person. I work for FedEx and I was just doing my job.
8 days after the alleged incident, Brandon Case and his father Gregory were arrested after turning themselves in.
Had it been a black father and son duo that shot at a white young man doing his job, do you think they would have allowed them a week to rest at home comfortably? No. They would have been immediately arrested that night and put in jail, and their charge would have been attempted murder.
Brookhaven Police Chief Kenneth Collins telling CNN they had arrest warrants drawn up and that race has nothing to do with the way the investigation has been handled. The elder Case now charged with conspiracy, his son with aggravated assault and extreme indifference for life, according to the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office. They say both men are now out on bond. NBC News reached out to attorneys for both men but have not heard back. The case for some reminiscent of Ahmaud Arbery, a black Georgia man who was chased and murdered by 3 white men while jogging through a neighborhood.
We could have had the same situation here.
Gibson and his attorney are now calling on the Lincoln County District Attorney to upgrade the charges to attempted murder and for the investigation to be turned over to the Mississippi Bureau of Investigations. They also want the men to face federal hate crime charges and have asked the FBI and Department of Justice to investigate.
This emboldened white vigilante that believes that he can tell a black man to do whatever he wants. And if that black man doesn't listen, we're going to take it back to the 50s. Had Mr. Gibson stopped that day, and had Mr. Gibson lost his life, there was no video this time.
All right, Priscilla Thompson joins us now from 30 Rock. Priscilla, I understand you spoke with the district attorney today. What did he say about those charges and how he plans to proceed?
That's right, Tom. Our team spoke with the DA there, who tells us they are considering all appropriate charges, including attempted murder, but that ultimately it will be up to a grand jury to decide whether to indict and on what charges. Now, as for any additional investigations or charges, we reached out to the Brookhaven Police Department, the FBI, and the Mississippi Bureau of Investigations. We did not hear back from any of those agencies, but the Department of Justice tells us that they are reviewing this matter. Tom?
Priscilla, thank you. Coming up on Top Story, in Mexico, the deadly violence continues. A 5th journalist killed already this year. Public outrage now growing. And the viral puzzle game Wordle being credited for helping to save, get this, a kidnapping victim. We'll fill in the blanks coming up. Back now with Top Stories news feed, and we begin tonight here in California with wildfires threatening several communities on the coast. The Emerald Fire burning more than 145 acres, only 20% contained so far. Crews have been working overnight to contain the flames. Families in Laguna Beach have been forced to evacuate. The fire destroying several homes in Santa Barbara County. A dry winter and record high temperatures fueling those blazes. And a Florida bus driver has been arrested for driving drunk with 40 children on board. Body cam footage shows Flagler County deputies arresting the driver, whose blood alcohol level was 4 times the legal limit. Police say a co-worker smelled alcohol in his breath and reported him to authorities. The driver charged with a DUI and resisting arrest. His bus was full of middle school students. Thankfully, none of them were hurt. All right, and the viral puzzle game Wordle is being credited for saving a kidnapped woman's life. Denise Holt's daughters say they grew worried when their mom failed to send them her Wordle score over the weekend, something she does every day. Police went to her home there in Illinois, finding Holt locked in a basement bathroom where a man who broke into her house was holding her hostage. That suspect now facing several charges, including aggravated kidnapping. All right, we want to turn now to the Americas, where we look at stories coming out of the U.S. and across Latin America. Tonight, more bloodshed in Mexico. Another journalist killed this week in the country. 5 reporters have now been killed there less than 2 months into the new year. Sinclair Esamwa takes us to Oaxaca, where public outrage is growing and journalists are demanding protections.
Tonight, a 5th journalist shot dead in Mexico just 6 weeks into 2022. Eber Lopez, director of the news site Noticia Web, killed in Oaxaca on Thursday. The state's Attorney General Arturo Clavo saying,
"We are already at 2 detainees, and there are also the guns with which they committed the crime."
Clavo says Lopez was entering a building in Salina Cruz when 2 people intercepted him and shot him. His murder now one in a string of Mexican journalist killings this year. Journalist Roberto Toledo's editor mourned his murder in January.
"We do not bring weapons. Our only defense is a pen, a pencil, a notebook."
Lourdes Maldonado, 68, was shot dead January 23rd in front of her house in Tijuana. Her family and friends demanded accountability at her funeral last month.
I hope that the truth will be transparent and they let us know what happened to Lupi.
On Tuesday, they got some answers.
It has not yet been possible to determine the motive.
State authorities say 3 people were arrested for her murder this week. The president of Mexico saying the slain journalists are not forgotten and that the government is investigating. But most cases involving journalist murders in Mexico do not end in arrest. At least 145 journalists were killed between 2000 and 2021. And the Committee to Protect Journalists says Mexico is among the deadliest countries for journalists outside of war zones. Now, Eber Lopez's colleagues demand more action.
Let's not wait for more journalists to spill their blood in Oaxaca, in Mexico, before you do something to stop the violence against freedom of expression.
All right, Zing Clay joins us now from 30 Rock Live tonight here on Top Story. Zing Clay, 5 journalists murdered in just 2 months into the year is pretty baffling. You know, what has the international response, and are the United States Senate, the U.S. House of Representatives, are they weighing in at all?
Yeah, Tom, it is really baffling, and it's not just the murders. The Committee to Protect Journalists said in addition to the killings of journalists this year, 2 journalists survived attacks and others reported death threats. But in response on Tuesday, we heard from U.S. senators, as you alluded to, from across the aisle. Senators Tim Kaine and Marco Rubio criticized Mexico's president and said the government has to do more to protect journalists. Tom?
All right, Zing Clay SMWA for us tonight. Zing Clay, thank you. We want to turn back now to the tensions between Ukraine and Russia. In our connected world, that conflict not as far away as you may think. New York City is home to the largest population of Ukrainian immigrants in the U.S. They're watching developments closely and are able to link up with the folks back home, even sometimes on the front lines. NBC News' Ellison Barber has that story.
New York's East Village is home to a neighborhood lovingly known as Little Ukraine. Andriy Dobryansky knows everyone.
We're in the remnants of the Yiddish section.
The son of Ukrainian immigrants, his father, a world-renowned opera singer. Andriy grew up in this neighborhood and now works for the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America.
It's not just the people of Ukraine and the neighboring countries who are affected, but it could domino effect throughout the world.
In this pocket of New York, home to the largest Ukrainian population in the U.S., Andriy is not the only one painstakingly watching the crisis unfold. Walter Lack is a recent transplant. In 2014, he was part of the revolution of dignity. Now he's watching his homeland from afar.
This is very emotionally turbulent time.
Walter put us in touch with some of his friends back home, most of them young activists like Melania Podolak.
It's been horrible for 8 years.
She was 17 when the protest at Maidan began. The fight for freedom, the violent fights with Russian separatists in Donbass, Russian troops in Crimea. It's been her entire adult life.
Say you do see a worst case scenario where Russia were to very aggressively invade kind of further into Ukraine. Do you have a plan for that?
Me personally, and people I'm friends with, they are the war vets and they have a plan. So if everything goes down, worst case scenario, they do have a unit they're going to join. We have a previous arrangement that I would join the medical service.
Some of her friends are already on the front lines. That's Dmytro Kochobailo, a first assault company commander with the Ukrainian Volunteer Corps. He sent us this video diary from eastern Ukraine.
Коли почалась війна, мені було 18 років. Зараз мені вже 26. Я продовжую боронити нашу країну.
Whether they were in New York City, Kyiv, or trenches along the border, we asked everyone the same question. What do they wish Americans knew about all of this.
I just wish people understood that, like, we're not a buffer state. Like, we are de facto, but like, that's not our identity.
All right, Ellison Barber joins me now live. Ellison, I'm curious, you spoke to those Ukrainian Americans, and they're talking to their relatives back in their homeland. I'm really curious about what they see America's role in this conflict.
Everyone that we spoke to, whether they were Ukrainian Americans, Ukrainians living in New York, or people living in Ukraine, young Ukrainians, they told us that they do not want to see U.S. boots on the ground. Do they want assistance from allies? They say yes. Remember, there was an agreement, the Budapest Memorandum, where in the 90s, Ukraine gave up a lot of nuclear weapons in exchange for security assurances. Because of that, they say, yes, we do want help. But one thing that I was struck by was how frequently every single one of them told me they did not want U.S. troops or any outside troops really fighting this alongside them. They said this is Ukraine's fight, and Ukrainians want to fight it. Tom?
Ellison, before you go, and briefly if you can, we heard from Richard Engel earlier in the broadcast telling us how Ukrainians don't think the war is going to happen. Do the Ukrainian Americans think that Russia is going to invade?
They say that this moment is an escalation. They say we have been at war for 8 years. So while they think it's interesting to see so many people in the global community having this big reaction, they say things have been bad for the last 8 years. Are they worried now? Yes. They were also worried 2 years ago, 4 years before that, and shortly after Russia annexed Crimea. Tom?
All right, Ellison Barber with a great report. Ellison, thank you for that. When we come back, this top story anchor taking a run at a Top Gun impression, our high-throttle preview of Sunday's Super Bowl flyover from inside the cockpit of an F-16. Stay with us. This Sunday, in what will be a spectacular sight, U.S. fighter jets will be flying over the stadium, perfectly timed at the precise finish of the national anthem in a show of America's military might. And I saw how they do it up close.
With speed, power, and precision, the F-16 Viper is more than just military muscle. 15 tons of metal and fire, accelerating with 27,000 pounds of mind-bending thrust. Now, the F-16 is taking center stage at the Super Bowl as part of the traditional military flyovers during the national anthem. But at this year's Super Bowl, a first. Soaring over the SoFi Stadium Sunday, a squad of 5 jets representing 75 years of the Air Force. And they'll take off from here, Joint Forces Training Base in Southern California. I got a front row seat to this thrill ride with F-16 pilot Major Garrett Schmitz, call sign Toro.
So you're going to get to fly over the Super Bowl. What's that like? Because it's an honor.
It is an honor. I mean, especially this year. So this year is the 75th anniversary of the Air Force.
Toro is an Air Force combat veteran and commander of the Viper demo team that performs air shows. But this will be his first flyover of the Super Bowl. Before I went up, the Viper team trained me in safety, teaching me how to breathe through the jet's power at all altitudes, how to eject in an emergency, and even take the controls myself. Then it was showtime.
You know I got your back, right?
This Tom joining this one in living out his Top Gun dreams.
I feel the need for speed.
Any advice for me? I'm going to be your wingman.
Just have fun.
I just want to make this very clear. You're going to let me fly this thing?
Yep. Yeah, you're going to fly it.
Strapped in, I braced for takeoff.
Here we go, Toro.
Altitude.
Yeah.
Altitude.
This is a good way to beat LA traffic.
We quickly hit Mach 1, going more than 700 miles an hour.
Toro, you can feel that power.
Then he went acrobatic, flying us upside down.
All right, we're inverted right now. No. Whoa! There's one. Oh! There's 2. Oh, man. There's 3.
The force, an incredible 9 Gs, equivalent to 1,800 pounds pressing down on us.
Oh, man, it felt like my eyes were going to pop out of my head. All right, your turn to fly. Here we go. I'm going to fly this sucker right now. Get a good feel for it. Roll it. There you go. Yeah. Nice. Oh, man. I'm actually flipping this thing right now.
This was the supersonic thrill of a lifetime, and one that ended way too fast.
Toro, thanks for the ride, man. I'm just wondering, is there any chance I could get a call sign?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm going to go with, let's go top story.
Top story. Sounds perfect.
Perfect.
We hope you have a great weekend. Remember to watch the game. Super Bowl coverage starts on the mothership, NBC at noon. So tune in on Sunday. Have a great weekend. Good night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.